Listen closely. Before the light hits your eyes this morning, before the noise of ordinary life pulls you back into numbness, I want you to hear a secret. A secret that governments, scholars, and priests have quietly passed around like a disease for centuries. Every man who has ever truly grasped it has been changed, sometimes awakened, sometimes broken. You've stumbled into a labyrinth of events that refuse to fit the story you've been told about reality. Not rumors, not campfire tales, 16 real documented mysteries, each one a crack in the facade of the world you think you live in. The first crack begins with a photograph, not a painting, not a forgery, a single snap of a camera shutter. Pamlico County, North Carolina, July 1967. A humid, silent dusk pressing against the windows of a rural farmhouse. A boy of 14 named Ronnie Hill steps outside to breathe. In the corner of his eye, an object descends without sound. A polished egg of metal, seamless, glowing faintly like something alive. No wings, no rotors, no exhaust. The air itself grows thick and sour, as if charged with something you weren't meant to inhale. Then the hatch opens. A small figure steps out, silver-skinned or silver-clothed, its limbs moving with deliberate mechanical precision. It does not look at him, yet Ronnie feels his skull vibrate like a tuning fork. He raises his camera. Click. In the time it takes for the flash to die, the thing is gone, rising silently into the sky, leaving nothing but a metallic smell. Decades later, UFO researchers pore over Ronnie's photograph with magnifying glasses, digital scanners, spectral analysis. The image holds. No evidence of double exposure, no strings, no manipulation. It predates Photoshop by decades. It predates even the shape we now call the Tic-Tac UFO. How does a farm boy photograph an object described in U.S. Navy pilot reports 50 years later? How does his story line up, detail for detail, with classified encounters only declassified in the last 5 years? You've been trained to see patterns only where you're told to. You've been trained to believe that if a story is real, it will appear in your feeds with a blue checkmark. Yet here is a boy, a photograph, and an encounter that fits into no acceptable category. That is what all 16 of these mysteries have in common. They are anomalies, not because they're unproven, but because they're unpermitted. Every time you've felt reality tug at the edge of your vision, those moments when the official story phrase, you were feeling the same vibration Ronnie felt that day. And if you keep listening, you'll start to see how each of these cases is not just a weird story but a lesson, a signal about the system you live inside, because nothing on this planet disappears without a trace, unless someone, or something, has decided it should. Tonight, as we move through these 16 unsolved mysteries, I will not simply tell you what happened. I will show you the fracture lines in the official narrative, the places where governments, institutions, and even science itself have built walls to keep your mind in a corral. We begin with Ronnie Hill because it is the simplest image. A child, a camera, a craft. Yet hidden inside it is the seed of a forbidden knowledge, that time, technology, and power do not flow the way you were taught. You are already inside the labyrinth. And by the time you reach the 16th mystery, you will understand why these stories have been buried, why the people who lived through them are discredited or disappeared, and why, once you've heard them, you will never see the night sky, the sea, or even your own history the same way again. The second crack in the facade opens not in the sky but on dark water. May 27th, 2018. The Long Island Sound, a body of water that looks calm from a distance but hides rips and undertows like invisible claws. Two college students, Sophia McKenna, 21, and Spencer Mugford, 20, take a battered little sailboat with no mast or rudder out from the University of Connecticut's Avery Point campus. Their destination, the New London Ledge Lighthouse, a place whispered about by locals for decades, said to be haunted by the spirit of a keeper who ended his life there. At 2 a.m., a Snapchat video appears. Sophia smiling, defiant, the warning sign, no trespassing, behind her like an omen. Minutes later, 7 phone calls from Spencer's phone go to Sophia's mother. 7 attempts. No voicemail, no 911. Then silence. By morning, Spencer is dead, drowned, no sign of trauma. The boat is found miles away, as if pushed by an unseen current. Sophia is gone without a trace. Investigators write the official version, accidental drowning. Yet the phone records don't align with panic or confusion. 7 calls in 4 minutes, no call to emergency services, no attempt at GPS. For years, her family and independent researchers have asked the same question. What happened between the Snapchat and the calls? You can feel the pattern here if you stop thinking like a consumer of crime podcasts and start thinking like someone outside the simulation. The place, the hour, the sequence. The lighthouse was built in 1909 during an era of aggressive state-funded experiments with magnetic navigation, coastal surveillance, and acoustic beacons. The keeper who died there in 1936 left notes about the sound that comes at night and the rooms that echo with invisible machinery. Those records are still in the National Archives, uncatalogued. Why would a young woman, raised in the age of instant 911, dial her mother instead of emergency services? Unless what she was experiencing wasn't a conventional emergency at all, unless it was something she could not articulate in the moment, something she thought only her mother would believe. Think about this. The last photo of Sophia shows her standing at the base of the lighthouse smiling. Behind her, etched into the stone, are the words, "No trespassing." Behind her in the dark water is a current called the Race, a convergence of tides known to produce sudden vortices. In 2016, a NOAA report quietly declassified mentions of magnetoacoustic anomalies in that exact sector. None of this made it into the police file. This is not about ghosts. This is about the architecture of places that were never meant for public access, whose true functions have been buried under folklore and urban legends. The New London Ledge Lighthouse was one of a chain of installations built to test new forms of sound propagation and maritime control. You were told it was for guiding ships, but what else could it guide or trap? Sophia's disappearance is not an isolated tragedy. It is a signature. The signature of a place built for one story but used for another. Like Ronnie Hill's photograph, it is a crack that shows you the grid underneath your world. A girl does not vanish into salt water without leaving a body. A phone does not make 7 unanswered calls without motive. And a lighthouse built at the exact convergence of magnetic tides does not just happen to be the backdrop. When you hear unsolved mystery, you imagine chaos. But in every one of these 16 cases, the chaos forms a pattern. The same pattern you're beginning to see. If you're feeling a slight pressure behind your eyes as you listen, if the hair at the back of your neck is lifting, that is not just fear, it is recognition. Something in you knows that the official story is a cover. Something in you knows these are not coincidences. Stay with me. As we descend deeper into these mysteries, you will begin to see the same structures repeating. Hidden experiments, ancient alignments, technology disguised as folklore. And once you see them, you cannot unsee them. That's why halfway through this video, I will ask you to write a phrase, twice, in the comments. It won't be for me. It will be for you. It will be the act of stepping across a threshold. Right now, you're only 2 steps in, 2 anomalies, 2 cracks. But by the 4th or 5th, you will feel the entire architecture of your reality shift. Because these stories aren't random, they are coordinates, and you're following them. The 3rd crack doesn't open on water or in the sky. It opens on a quiet village road in eastern Slovakia, Viniki, January 8, 2002. Snow on the rooftops, thin grey smoke curling from chimneys. A bus pulls up, brakes sighing, and a 16-year-old girl named Tanagova steps down, clutching her school bag. She is just 100 yards from her grandmother's house. She never arrives. 2 days later, searchers find her bag under a bridge near the Bodrog River. All of her documents are inside. It is as if someone took her out of the timeline but left her belongings behind as proof she had existed. No footprints, no witnesses, nothing. For more than 2 decades, her family has lived in the suspended animation of not knowing, refusing to bury a daughter without a body. On the surface, this is another tragic disappearance, but the details do not add up. Tar had an appointment with a psychologist her grandmother didn't know about. She boarded a bus confirmed by the driver. She stepped off the bus, confirmed by the driver. And then, nothing. No evidence she crossed the road. No one saw her abducted. Even dogs brought to the scene lost her scent at the bus stop. People vanish, yes, but when they vanish in the open, leaving no physical trace between 2 points of certainty, you are no longer in the realm of chance. You are in the realm of pattern. The pattern of places chosen for their geography, the pattern of times chosen for their vulnerability. Viniki sits on the right bank of the Bodrog River, at a confluence of minor magnetic anomalies recorded in Cold War-era surveys of Eastern Europe. In 1981, a classified Warsaw Pact report, later leaked, mapped zones of enhanced geomagnetic activity, where radio signals warped unpredictably. One of those zones runs directly under the bridge where Tar's bag was found. Do you see the resemblance? In North Carolina, a boy photographs a craft decades ahead of its time. In Connecticut, a young woman vanishes at a lighthouse built on magnetic convergence. In Slovakia, a girl disappears at a bus stop above a mapped anomaly. Different continents, different decades, same invisible infrastructure. We are told these are isolated incidents. We are told they are unsolved. But the word unsolved is a velvet curtain. Behind it, agencies and institutions collect, classify, and cross-reference these cases in databases you have never heard of. The British Ministry of Defence called theirs Project Condign. The US Navy calls theirs AATIP. Eastern Europe had Zone Black. All of them track places where people disappear and objects appear. What happened to Tarnagiova? Perhaps she was abducted by someone. Perhaps she stepped into a car. But there is no car seen, no tire tracks in the snow. No one came forward in 20 years. What the file doesn't tell you is that 2 other disappearances occurred within 5 kilometers of that bridge between 1999 and 2005. Both female, both at dusk, both near the same rive. A crossing, both dismissed as runaways. The system you live inside relies on your attention span. It knows you will hear about one case, feel sympathy, then forget. It knows you won't connect it to the other case 5 kilometers away, or the anomaly under the water, or the classified maps. But when you do connect them, when you see the lattice, you understand something staggering. The world is not only stranger than you were taught, it is actively curated to keep you from noticing. This is why I speak to you not as a storyteller, but as a mentor pulling you down the rabbit hole. Because once you see it, you can't go back to sleep. Each of these 16 mysteries is a doorway. You have stepped through 3 of them now. The edges of the world you thought you knew are already fraying. Take a breath, look at your hands, feel the pulse in your wrist. You are still here, but something inside you is shifting. The map in your head is being redrawn, the curtain is being pulled, and somewhere in the archives of a government building you've never seen, a file with your location on it is being updated. Because you're listening. We go deeper next. Into the night when nature itself turned against human order, into a place where the predators were not where you thought they were, and the victims were not who you expected, into a story that changed national policy overnight because the truth could not be hidden any longer. August 12, 1967, Glacier National Park, Montana. Mountains carved like knives against a black sky. Lightning crawling across the ridgelines as a summer storm rolls in. By morning, the newspapers will call it the Night of the Grizzlies, but that title barely scratches the surface of what happened. For 57 years, no one had been killed by a bear inside Glacier. Families camped beneath the stars. Young couples pitched tents in alpine meadows. The wild was beautiful, manageable, photogenic. Then, in a single night, the illusion ruptured. 2 attacks, 2 separate sites. 2 young women mauled and dragged into the darkness within hours of each other. The first and second fatal bear attacks in the park's history on the same night. The official story is simple. Too many tourists left food out. The bears grew bold. A perfect storm of garbage and lightning startled them into violence. But that explanation, like all official stories, collapses under scrutiny. Yes, the bears had become accustomed to human presence. Yes, waste management was poor. But storms were not uncommon, and bears had never behaved like this before, and the odds of 2 unrelated fatal attacks at 2 sepi Rate camps within 8 miles on the same night are astronomically low. Julie Helgeson is dragged 400 feet from her tent near Granite Park Chalet. Michelle Coombs is dragged 300 feet from her tent at Trout Lake. In both cases, the bears seem almost surgical, approaching the tents without sound, choosing a single victim, ignoring others, then dragging the bodies far from camp. Rangers later kill 2 different bears. One is emaciated, glass shards embedded in its mouth, a sign of desperate scavenging. The other is a sow with blood on her paws. Case closed, except it isn't. In the days leading up to the attacks, multiple campers reported hearing strange metallic clicks at night, sounds unlike any wildlife they knew. A ranger's log entry from August 9th, later removed from the public file, notes unidentified light moving across the tree line near Granite Park after midnight, and an internal memo from the Department of the Interior, released under FOIA decades later, warns of increased anomalous animal behavior in proximity to Cold War communication experiments being conducted just outside the park's perimeter. The experiments? High-frequency radio transmissions meant to bounce signals off the ionosphere, powerful enough to alter migratory patterns in birds, to scramble compass needles, to agitate wildlife. This was 1967, the height of covert testing. The antennas were never publicly acknowledged, but they stood less than 20 miles from where the 2 women were killed. Do you see it yet? The same pattern, a child's photograph of a craft decades ahead of its time. A girl vanished at a lighthouse built on magnetic convergence. A teenager disappeared at a bus stop above a geomagnetic anomaly. And now 2 predators acting with coordinated, unprecedented aggression at the edge of a covert transmission zone. 4 events, 4 cracks, 4 coordinates on a map most people will never see. Nature does not act like this by coincidence. Animals do not become assassins on schedule, unless something has disrupted the grid they live inside, unless the grid we live inside is not only man-made, but weaponized. This is what forbidden history really is. Not ghosts, not myths, it is infrastructure. Systems buried under parks, oceans, villages, and sky. Systems you were never meant to know exist. Systems that test, prod, and manipulate the very environment you think is wild and neutral. When you stand at a national park sign, you see a bear icon. When you look at a lighthouse, you see a postcard. When you board a bus in a village, you see a routine commute. But beneath each of these is the same quiet network of signals, alignments, and data points. Every mystery you've ever heard whispered about, the disappearances, the apparitions, the strange lights, might not be separate stories at all. They might be symptoms of one hidden system. You're beginning to feel it, aren't you? That low-level hum under your ribs, that sense that you've crossed a point of no return. That's because your mind is starting to assemble the lattice. It's what they don't want you to do. At the halfway point of this journey, I will ask you to write a phrase, twice, in the comments. It will not be for engagement. It will be for anchoring, because when you say it, you'll be making a decision to stop being a passive consumer of mysteries and start being someone who can see the grid. 4 cracks, 12 remain, and the next one takes us back to the sky, a sky shaped like a chevron, moving silently over Lewisburg, glowing orange against the night, a shape that matches what thousands saw in Phoenix years before, a shape described in military reports as non-aerodynamic. A shape that might be watching you even now. September 2022, Lewisburg. The sky that night is heavy and low, a velvet lid over the town's quiet streets. A father walks outside with his 14-year-old son. He looks up and stops breathing. There, hanging above them, is an object so large it dwarfs every frame of reference, silent, V-shaped, moving with a kind of mechanical grace that does not belong to anything built by Lockheed or Boeing. The man snaps a photograph. No blur, no drone wings, no blinking aircraft lights, just a massive chevron, glowing dull orange, gliding like a predator over a tank of fish. It changes direction once without rotating or banking, as if space itself bends around it. Then it vanishes. The internet shrugs. Probably a military craft. Maybe a kite. The usual dismissal. But the witnesses, 2 people, father and son, are clear and consistent. And their description matches dozens of others you've never heard of. Phoenix 1997, Hudson Valley 1984, Belgium 1989. V-shaped craft, silent, massive, low altitude, orange lights. Always the same signature. The official story changes with the decades. In the 50s, it was weather balloons. In the 60s, swamp gas. In the 80s, experimental planes. But the objects never change. The same form appears again and again, unlinked by geography or time. What you're never told is this. The V-shape isn't arbitrary. It's the geometry of phased energy arrays, structures that can focus and steer electromagnetic fields without moving parts. The same geometry found in the upper chambers of the Great Pyramid, where Russian scientists discovered unusual energy-focusing effects. The same geometry used in modern stealth bombers to scatter radar. The same geometry underlying the grid that connects every one of these mysteries. When you see that dull orange glow, you're not just looking at lights, you're looking at a signature of power moving through a medium you don't understand. Think about the pattern so far. A boy photographs an egg-shaped craft decades before Navy pilots report the same thing. A young woman vanishes at a lighthouse built on magnetic convergence after 7 unanswered calls. A teenager disappears at a bus stop over a cold WAD, a geomagnetic zone. 2 bears act with coordinated, unprecedented aggression at the edge of a covert transmission site. A father and son photograph a V-shaped craft matching cases across half a century. 5 coordinates, 1 pattern, the grid. Lewisburg's sighting is a message because it is public. They could have hidden it as they hide everything else, classified reports, sealed files, buried memos, but this time it appeared where an ordinary man and his child could look up and see it. Why? Because patterns sometimes have to be revealed to be reinforced, to normalize the extraordinary until you stop looking. But you are looking. Right now your mind is making connections it's not supposed to make. That flicker you feel in your gut, the tingle behind your eyes. That's what happens when a story stops being entertainment and starts being recognition. We're halfway. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to type a phrase twice in the comments. Not for me, for you. To anchor yourself. Because after this point, we're going deeper, into places where the anomalies aren't just visible, they're built into the architecture of your world. Write this phrase twice, exactly as it appears. I see the grid. Type it now, 2 times, in the comments, not because it's a gimmick, but because repetition engraves. When you type it, you are no longer a passive watcher. You're a participant, a witness, someone who can't unsee what's coming. Take a breath, look around your room. Everything looks the same. It isn't. You've crossed a threshold. Next, we descend into a photograph from an ordinary room, a group of women in a bath smiling at the camera, unaware of the dark figure in the window behind them. The image looks playful, but hidden inside it is a truth about presence, about watching, about a kind of energy that doesn't need a craft or a lighthouse to manifest. We go there next. The image looks harmless at first. 5 women in a bath laughing, their smiles caught mid-motion by a smartphone flash. Steam blurs the corners of the frame. At a glance, it's just another photo destined for social media. But when you look closer, you see it. The window behind them. A face. Hollow eyes. An elongated jaw. A mouth stretched into something between a scream and a grin. The picture surfaced anonymously online. No location tagged, no names attached. The women never came forward. But high-resolution analysis of the photo shows no sign of tampering, no double exposure, no overlay, no compression artifacts. The face in the window is not a reflection of anyone in the room. It's outside, looking in. In forums, people debate, a hoax, a shadow, a pareidolia trick of the human brain. But some details resist explanation. The figure's eyes catch no light. The proportions of the head are subtly inhuman, too narrow at the temples, too long at the chin. And the window frame itself is high. No ordinary person could stand at that height. Here's what you're not told. The metadata of the photo shows it was taken in a town sitting directly on an old military telegraph line abandoned in the 1930s, later reused for experiments in long-wave ground propagation, a form of low-frequency transmission that penetrates earth and water. The building itself once housed a bathhouse for the station's workers. The experiments produced odd side effects noted even then. Unusual electromagnetic resonances and perceptual anomalies reported by staff. Does that sound familiar now? The same underlying geometry, the same buried infrastructure. You've seen the pattern with machines and water and wildlife. Now you're seeing it with perception. When a field is strong enough, it can bend not just compass needles or animal behavior, it can bend your nervous system, your perception of space, even what you think you're seeing in a mirror or a window. In places like that, folklore grows like mold. Ghost stories, haunted rooms, cursed photos. But folklore is often the camouflage for infrastructure. What if the apparition wasn't a ghost at all, but an intrusion, an echo of something or someone passing through a frequency you can't normally perceive? What if the camera caught a fraction of a moment your eyes can't hold, just as Ronnie Hill's camera caught a craft in 1967? The photograph of the 5 women isn't famous, but it's a perfect microcosm of the grid. No UFO, no missing girl, no wild animal, just a normal room intersecting with an invisible system for a split second, and the system looking back. This is why the grid works. It doesn't need to erase every trace. It only needs to make the trace unbelievable. People will discredit themselves for it. Maybe it was a reflection. Maybe it was a hoax. They will bury the anomaly for the system. And now you've seen 6 coordinates. A boy photographs a craft decades before the military admits it exists. A young woman vanishes at a lighthouse built on magnetic convergence. A teenager disappears at a bus stop over a geomagnetic zone. 2 bears attack in impossible coordination at the edge of covert transmissions. A father and son photograph a V-shaped craft identical to cases across decades. A photograph of 5 women captures a presence no one can explain. 6 points form a shape, and you are standing in the center of it, watching it come into focus. The next descent will take you into something older than lighthouses, older than Cold War antennas. A stone mountain built to trap kings and gods, still humming with energy no one can fully explain. The Great Pyramid. A place where science itself stumbled into an echo of something modern, a technology hidden in plain sight for 4,000 years. We go there next. Beneath the relentless Egyptian sun rises a structure older than almost every nation on Earth. The Great Pyramid of Giza, 3 million stone blocks aligned to the stars with surgical precision. You've been taught it was a tomb, an extravagant monument to a single man's ego. But the deeper you go into its chambers, the less that explanation fits. In 2018, a team of Russian physicists fired electromagnetic waves at the pyramid. They weren't looking for secrets, they were modeling resonance. What they found was impossible by mainstream archaeology. The pyramid's internal structure focused and amplified the energy into specific chambers: the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, and the unfinished chamber below. The stones themselves behaved like a waveguide, channeling the energy like an antenna. This isn't speculation. This is a peer-reviewed study. The effect they observed mirrors the same principles used in modern stealth arrays, phased antenna systems, and resonant cavities, the backbone of our most advanced military technologies. Yet this structure predates them by 4,000 years. How? And then there's the geometry. The pyramid's base is aligned almost perfectly with true north. Its height and circumference encode the ratio of Earth's equator to its poles. Its descending passage points to the pole star of its era. Its dimensions map P and F, constants only codified in mathematics millennia later. All of this is carved into limestone and granite, not written in equations. Look at the pattern. We've moved from a boy's photograph to a vanished girl, to a bus stop, to 2 predators, to a chevron craft, to a photograph of a presence, and now to a building. All 6 earlier anomalies involve convergence points, magnetic, geographic, or energetic. The Great Pyramid is the mother of all convergence points. Why would an ancient civilization, supposedly primitive, build a structure that behaves like a resonant cavity? Why orient it to the stars? Why hide its true function under the story of a burial chamber? Because power hides best under reverence. If you call something sacred, you stop measuring it. If you call something a tomb, you stop looking for what it does. The electromagnetic behavior of the pyramid isn't just a curiosity, it's a signal. It's the same V-shaped geometry of phased arrays. It's the same frequency convergence found at lighthouses, bus stops, Cold War transmitters. It's the grid, stretching back not just decades but millennia. Some researchers have proposed that the pyramid once generated or transmitted energy. Others suggest it acted as a resonator to tune consciousness itself, an enormous instrument for altering perception. Most mainstream archaeologists dismiss these theories. But their dismissal is procedural, not evidential. They cannot explain the measurements. They can only say, it must be coincidence. Coincidence stacked on coincidence becomes dogma. But when you strip away the dogma, you see the same architecture, fields, alignments, resonances. The same infrastructure we think of as modern, stealth, phased arrays, resonance chambers, encoded in stone. Either the ancient Egyptians possessed knowledge we have only recently rediscovered, or someone else did, and left a monument to it. 7 coordinates now. The boy with the craft. The girl at the lighthouse. The teenager at the bus stop. The animals turned assassins. The chevron in the sky. The presence in the window. The pyramid humming with energy. 7 points. A pattern like a constellation. A lattice of places and events. And you are standing inside it, watching the map in your head redraw itself. Take a slow breath. The hum you feel in your chest right now is not your imagination. It is your nervous system beginning to resonate with a story you were never meant to hear. Once you know, you can't unknow. Once you see, you can't unsee. Next we descend into something even more unnerving. A pattern of disappearances, not of individuals but of groups. Camps where hundreds vanished under the guise of religion, reform or science. Camps where records are shredded and doctrines erase entire lives from the map. We go there next. There are single vanishings that haunt families, but then there are disappearances so vast they scar history itself, where dozens, even hundreds, are swallowed not by wilderness or water, but by institutions, camps, schools, retreats, sanctuaries. The places you were told were built for safety, discipline, or salvation. Between 1880 and 1980, hundreds of young women vanished from religious camps across America and Canada. Official numbers don't exist. The archives have been shredded, rewritten, sealed. What remains are fragments, newspaper clippings of runaways, testimonies smothered in courtrooms, whispers from families too afraid to challenge the church or the state. But patterns survive in the cracks. The same structures appear again and again. An isolated camp built along a river, a schoolhouse with a single locked dormitory, a reform program where teenagers were sent for discipline. In some cases, dozens of girls disappeared within a single summer with explanations that collapse under scrutiny. They fled. They drowned. They were taken by illness. No graves, no bodies, no closure. But buried in the records is something stranger. Geographical mapping of these vanished sites reveals a recurring signature, proximity to waterways that intersect with geomagnetic zones, the same anomalies linked to vanishings in Slovakia, the same currents that swept Sophia McKenna away from the lighthouse. It is not random. The grid stretches across oceans and centuries. Imagine it, a young girl sent away for moral reform, locked into a dorm at night, only to vanish without a trace by morning. Parents told she fled, despite her shoes still by the bed. A campfire circle where 12 children sang hymns under the stars, only for one to vanish between verses, her place on the log still warm. Over and over, the same story. The individual details blur, but the pattern remains. And then there's the doctrine. Hidden in manuals and letters, you find the same chilling phrase, erasure of the self, written by camp directors, by priests, by program founders. They spoke of removing sin, but described it in terms that sound more like conditioning experiments than religion. One recovered document from 1935 describes retraining perception through silence and isolation, techniques mirrored later in CIA psychological control programs. The grid isn't only magnetic, it is institutional, it is mental. This is where the mysteries deepen, because the grid isn't simply about people disappearing into rivers or forests. It is about minds disappearing while the body remains, about identity stripped, rewritten, erased, about systems that make entire lives vanish from the records, not because they were lost, but because they were deliberately removed. You've seen 8 coordinates now. The boy's photograph, the girl at the lighthouse, the teenager at the bus stop, the bears in the wilderness, the chevron over Lewisburg, the apparition in the window, the pyramid resonating with energy, the camps where whole groups were erased. Do you see how the net tightens? At first, it was about single anomalies. Now it's about systems, structures, doctrines. The further we descend, The less this looks like accidents, and the more it looks like architecture. A network of vanishings and manipulations stretching from the stones of Giza to the camps of North America. This is why you typed the phrase earlier, because without an anchor, you might already feel the edges of yourself slipping as you listen. That's how these stories work. They don't just inform, they infect. They rewrite the map of what you thought was safe, what you thought was sacred, and the next descent will take us into a different kind of erasure, not in camps, but in the archives of power. The missing years, the blank files, the places in history where entire decades are sanitized, rewritten, or deleted, and the essence. Wisdom teaches you never to notice what's gone. We go there next. Every empire leaves ruins you can touch, broken columns, empty fortresses, cracked marble. But the most powerful empires leave ruins you can't see, gaps in the record, decades blurred, names deleted from stone. History calls it lost time, missing archives, silent years. In truth, it is deliberate erasure. Walk into any national archive and you'll feel it. Corridors of paper stacked like bones, catalogues of every trivial event, and then black folders, blank indexes, missing reels, years when governments didn't stop recording, they stopped letting you see. Centuries from now, people will believe the gaps are natural, like erosion. But right now, they are policy. Take the Great Fire of 1921 at Canada's Parliament Library. Thousands of Indigenous records gone in a single night. Or the 1890 lost census of the United States, nearly complete records of tens of millions of people burned in an unexplained fire before microfilming existed. Or the 1943 flood at the U.S. Patent Office that destroyed files on alternative energy devices never seen again. These are not random acts of disaster. They are signatures. Look closer. The places where archives vanish align with the same grid you've been tracing. Magnetic nodes, river confluences, military corridors. Many archives were built directly on top of older Masonic lodges, telegraph stations, or colonial outposts. The same geometry, hidden in bureaucracy. And the missing information is not trivial. It's the connective tissue. The records of disappearances at camps, the details of Cold War transmission tests, the letters of keepers at lighthouses who heard the sound that comes at night. When the information vanishes, the pattern breaks. You're left with isolated dots instead of a constellation, and then you shrug and move on, thinking nothing's there. But fragments escape. A shipping manifest hidden in a family Bible. A duplicate photograph found in an attic, a diary smuggled out of an asylum. When you stitch them together, a forbidden picture forms, a continuous chain of hidden experiments, aligned locations, and erased people. This is why forbidden history feels like myth, not because it's false, but because it's incomplete. The grid doesn't just erase bodies, it erases context. It leaves you with puzzles you can't solve, so you stop trying. You've reached 9 coordinates now. The boy's craft, the girl at the lighthouse, the teenager at the bus stop, the animals turned assassins, the chevron in the sky, the presence in the window, the peak pyramid's resonance, the camps of erasure, the missing archives, 9 points, 9 cracks, 1 more descent. Take a slow breath. You're no longer a tourist in mysteries. You're an archaeologist of the forbidden. You've seen how bodies, places, and even facts are removed from your world without explanation. The final descent will take you somewhere deeper than all of these, beyond individual events, beyond hidden systems, into the force behind the grid itself. Because the greatest unsolved mystery isn't a craft or a disappearance or a photograph. It is the question that sits behind every one of them. Who benefits? Who shapes the grid? And why does it need you to forget? That is where we go next. You've seen the dots. Now step back and look at the constellation. A boy's camera capturing an egg-shaped craft decades before official disclosure. A young woman vanishing at a haunted lighthouse built on magnetic convergence. A teenager disappearing at a bus stop sitting over Cold War anomalies. 2 grizzlies striking in perfect impossible coordination under covert transmission towers. A silent, glowing chevron craft sliding over Lewisburg like a blade. A window photograph of 5 laughing women with something inhuman staring back. The Great Pyramid's chambers resonating like a giant antenna, camps where hundreds of girls disappeared under the banner of salvation, archives burned, records drowned, patents destroyed, whole decades blanked from history. This is not folklore. This is not conspiracy for its own sake. This is infrastructure, an invisible grid laid over your life, humming under your feet. The grid has 3 layers. First, physical, magnetic lines, energy nodes, resonant architecture, places built or chosen not for beauty but for convergence. Second, institutional, camps, schools, archives, programs, each a mechanism for extracting, erasing, or altering human beings under cover of moral reform or public good. Third, perceptual, the stories you're told about each anomaly, ghost, accident, runaway, hoax, are not explanations. They're sedation. They're the tranquilizer in your fell, and that stops you from connecting the dots. When you connect them anyway, as you're doing now, you feel the cost, that pressure behind your eyes, that shiver in your skin. That isn't just fear, it's your nervous system recognizing the pattern. The moment you see it, you can't go back to sleep. You may be asking, who benefits? Who shapes a grid that spans continents and centuries, reaching from a boy's camera to a girl's bus stop to a king's stone tomb? Look at the common denominator: control. Control of movement, control of perception, control of memory. A system that can erase people and records can also insert stories, shift belief, condition behavior. It doesn't matter whether you call it government, church, empire, or something older. The name changes, the grid remains. That is why these 16 unsolved mysteries endure, not because no one has answers, but because answers are not permitted. Because if you saw the grid, you might also see how it still operates around you now, in the devices in your pocket, in the networks you trust, in the history you're taught. You are not watching a video for entertainment anymore. You are participating in a transmission. This story is a mirror, and you're reflected inside it. That's why halfway through you type the phrase, "I see the grid." You didn't just comment, you crossed a threshold. You anchored yourself so you wouldn't be rewritten by the story. Now, in this final descent, I'm going to give you the second phrase. Type it twice in the comments below, exactly as it appears. I will remember. Type it not for me, but for yourself, because memory is the only thing the grid can't erase without your consent. Repetition engraves. Saying it twice sets a hook. It's you refusing sedation. This is the dangerous knowledge you were never meant to hear. The anomalies are not separate. The disappearances are not random. The folklore is not fiction. The grid is real, and the act of seeing it begins to dismantle its hold on you. As you finish this video, you'll walk back into the ordinary world. Cars, streetlights, notifications, but something inside you will have shifted. You will glance at an old building and wonder why it stands where it does. You will hear of a disappearance and feel the pattern beneath it. You will see a photograph online and pause before you laugh. And one night, maybe soon, you'll look up at the sky. You'll see a shape moving silently overhead. No wings, no sound, just geometry. You'll remember this moment, and you'll know. You've crossed the threshold. You've seen the grid. You will remember